welcome to the Man Myth Podcast. Today we're talking about lying. No
Not,
tigers and bears, though, right?
not on the couch. You're right. So
Lying.
dry humor. So on today we'll talk about how we lie to ourselves, how we tell ourselves the truth it, that is a lie, and how lies can become truths. And I think once we untie this little knot that we create in this self talk, and a lot of it's what we've been taught, or when we put ourselves down a little bit so that other people don't jump on it, maybe. Um, so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along, also. But this week, for me, if you don't mind me going right into it, has been kind of a crap show. And the the thing about it is, I've had a lot of changes in the last year, and the last 2 weeks have been accelerated. But I don't not have a community that supports me, and that's the key. I think that's one of the things we talk about is how important it is to go ahead and reach out. I wasn't very good at that for a long time. I wasn't very good at receiving, but I think as I get into this new path that I'm working. So last week I unceremoniously stopped being a chiropractor, and then this week we have this little fence issue going on with one of the guys that's in a farm next to me, and there's a bunch of other personal things going on. So I was really getting into this, like, a little bit down, but then I remembered I've got 5 dogs, take a walk, get out in nature, sit on the land, hug a tree, had lunch with one of my friends, um, and he's like texted me a couple times because we talked about both of our weeks, and then he he texted today, said everything cool. But that's the funny thing about as small as the group as we reach right now. We're still making changes. I've had guys that I hadn't heard from in a long time reach out, so it's kind of cool. So it isn't that we're alone, and I don't have to go through this alone. I can actually talk about it. If I need to call you, you're right there. If I need to chat
Yes, sir.
with Megs or something like that, everybody's right there. Um, and it's
Right.
actually it makes me feel good, but it also makes me feel a lot more free. Like I don't have to put on a persona of being the tough guy anymore. I can just walk through these things and work through these things, and as that happens, my mood completely changes. And I think that's where I'm kind of going with this. I'd love to see people do the same thing. The funny thing is, since we've started this, has been some of the roughest emotional times for me in the last 10 years. But like I expressed to
Yeah.
people, we're just learning. We're healing as we're doing this. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about this. And I just I love being me. But there are times where it's like yesterday I was just like, dude, I'm just gonna take a day off. And I did. I just rested and did some internal work, did some a big drumming journey, some Akashic records. I just took care of myself, and that's another different thing for me. So just throwing the week out there so we can kind of get an idea about where I'm at least. How about you?
How was my week?
Yeah,
Well, I kind of feel bad talking about it now.
that's why I went first.
My week was.
You'll pump me up.
Um, well, I mean, I haven't had the easiest last, 6 months either. Um, but I just keep plugging along. And a while ago, it would have hit me a lot harder, and I would have had a lot harder time with everything that had happened. Um, but this podcast, the people we've met on the podcast is, I mean, it's just how, like you said, we're healing along with everybody that we're reaching, everybody that is listening. So it's really awesome to like get to go through the journey together, and not know that you're not alone in this on this walk of life. But this week I found out I'm going to be getting the job I wanted, or last week I found out I was going to be getting the job I wanted, doing maintenance. And then today I found out like my route, and I'm getting a new company vehicle and all this stuff. Like, it's just it's been a really good week for me. The baby's staying asleep longer, so that's always nice. Makes it a little easier.
Sure.
But yeah, it was just. But I know, I mean, we all have those weeks where it's just like when it rains, it pours. It just keeps coming, and there's no. You think the rule of three, like bad things happen in threes, and then 4, 5, and 6 come at you, and you're like, well, I got to double up this time. But I'm proud you took a day to yourself. I know you don't get like just doing stuff that was good for you. I know that's not something you usually do a lot, but I also think it's very important. Self-care is, I mean, that goes into love yourself. You need to find something that just clears your mind. So I'm proud of you for getting that done.
Yeah,
And the dogs are so cute. They gotta cheer you up.
they do. And I use my tools in my toolbox, and that's when we talk about, and we've said this several times with people, and I've had a couple comments about that. They're like, they never thought of it that way, but if they keep following, and we add tools, like this episode where we talk about lying, I think it's going to be important for people to understand that it is a toolbox. It's like a place where they can go and they can say, okay, I need to go ahead and do a meditation, or I need to do a cold shower, whatever it is. As we go along, we'll add all these things. But again, I didn't. Even though I had that crap week, I still have so much joy in my heart for so many other things, and
Right.
that's what a lot of this is teaching me. I've had people reach out from the practice, and I've had 2 lunches with people that that we just normally have once a month lunches. So it's been really cool. I mean, I don't want to say that it was a negative. I'm just saying I had that, and I deal so much better with it because I'm connected with people more, and I have a community. And I think that's really what I want to convey with it. But there's nothing in my life that is so distracting that can take any joy out of my life. So it's kind of that process. And Rhonda called, and she's like, "Are you? I don't think you're sharing all your emotions on this podcast." I was like, "Okay, let me do that." Right? Sis
Yeah, it's
she's
well, and
but she's just she people love me for some reason, and it's it just brings me so much joy when those little things happen. It's this, for me, it's a lot of times it's just the small things that are just like that crack me up. I'll wake up in the middle of the night laughing about something
Yeah.
that happened during the week. So
yeah, it's nice to have the toolbox. It's almost like the spoonful of sugar to get the medicine down. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you just got to take that medicine, but you use the right tools and it goes down a lot smoother. You get through it faster. You get over it a lot quicker. And that's the tools have helped me do. It's not necessarily not getting upset or not being kind of down. It's pushing through it and getting through it and coming out with just as much joy as I had before whatever had gone on. And I think that's the big thing with, like, when I got laid off and we had the house, everything was just kind of going sideways. So that was like the biggest thing. It wasn't that I wasn't upset or that I didn't get down on myself, but I pushed through it and I got through it easier and faster and dealt with it better than I had before. And that's what really, that's the big change I've noticed.
And one of the people I went to lunch with today, they were talking about how they got into this situation. They were telling a story from the past. They said they told this person that they were confiding in that, you may have to stop me from having this huge rage. And I said something. I was like, don't stop the rage. Just find a safe place where you can let it go. Right? If it's someplace where we've talked about pillow screaming or cussing or letting that anger or that rage out, and in a safe place where you're not going to hurt yourself or others. And it's like, if you've ever seen the videos where the antelope gets away from the cheetah or whatever, when after that happens,
Yeah.
When the antelope gets away, it'll be 30 yards from the cheetah. The cheetah's panting like crazy and it shakes real hard, and then it just goes back to grazing. And that shaking is what takes the terror out of it and resets its system so that it can actually do it again.
Right. So they're ready for the next time.
Right. Don't be afraid of the rage as much as finding a place that you can go, a person that you can talk to, whatever it is that you can set in it and actually let that rage out. And I always got into this space where I thought my rage was, when I let it out, it was going to be super, super like high energy and violent or whatever. And so I'd go in and I'd be like really prepared. I'd have like pillows and I'd be ready to punch them. And then I'd just take a deep breath and everything would just kind of melt away. And I was like, well, that seems, anticlimactic really, but it showed me how easy it is to do it. You go through the process where it takes less and less each time. And the breath will really help that happen. So, just another tool.
Yeah, breathing is such a strong tool too. Learning how to breathe to deal with different situations. I mean, it's just like running. Like, if you know how to breathe, if you can get your breathing down, it helps you be able to run faster, longer. It gets more oxygen to your body also. So it's not even just when you're doing sports, but the proper breathing is so important in all aspects of life. And then you have special breathing. I mean, I'm sure you know tons of breathing techniques, and I see them all the time. But
yeah, the most
yeah,
basic,
it's just crazy how something so little.
The most basic one is what I call the box breath, and it's breathing in for 4 counts, holding it for 4 counts, out for 4 counts, holding it for 4 counts, and then back in for 4 counts. And you just cycle that until you start your blood pressure, your heart rate, everything will go down. And that's really a calming breath. It's the most simple.
Right.
You can do it for 8, you can do it for 4, you can do however long it takes you, depending on your fitness level.
To feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, anything else before we get into stop lying?
I have nada.
Nada.
Oh, I do have one more thing actually. It was really cool to see David Billington on Facebook shout us out and talk about our podcast. I want to thank him for that. It was really awesome. He didn't have to do that, but he started listening to the podcast. But he's also he's a friend of mine from the military, mm-hmm. and it's one of those things that I haven't talked to him in forever, and now he listens to the podcast and texts me or messaged me saying, you know, he's gone through stuff, and if I ever need to, you know, talk to somebody, he's there. It's just nice knowing you have this, even though it's a small group right now, you have this little group of people who you can reach out to and talk to, and that will listen and not judge and um, not compare their life to yours, or look down on you for feeling a certain way. It's just nice to have that dynamic in this little community that we've started.
Mm-hmm. Yet our sponsor or our affiliate.
Oh, our affiliate, yeah, everyman.co. Everything they have so much stuff for the like modern day like man. They have notebooks, they have backpacks, they have really nice pens and mechanical pencils. Um, they have a bunch of other stuff too. I can't think of off the top of my head. I wasn't ready for it. I forgot. But yeah, they everybody go. We have affiliate link in the footer of this podcast, and we will also have it on our Instagram. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, we will have it in the description of the YouTube video
Oh,
because we're fancy.
We're getting techie that way, aren't we? And by we, I mean you.
Yeah, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm doing my best.
That's good. Lord. So today's there's a couple of big episodes I think coming up because of people as they come in. It's funny because I have men and women and just this little odd group of people that come in and chat with me about like when I was at the office, or now they text me and they're like, this would be a great podcast idea, I think, or you know, just chatting back and forth. And I think it's pretty amazing because I love that they're listening and they're learning more about me and you and about themselves. And I think that's one of the big keys. But today's came to me when I was a little bit in one of my little downs on the week, and I think I just sent it to you, like remind me about this. But the lies that we tell ourselves. So the title's Stop Lying to Yourself, and the way that ties in is I got into a space where I was working with a little shadow, and I was like, man, this always. And as soon as I said always, I stopped myself. I just figured it out right then. I didn't go into it anymore because that's an absolute lie I'm telling myself. Because anytime you talk in absolutes, pretty much it's going to be a lie. To yourself especially, right? And I've heard other people say that you always are mean to me,
for sure.
And that could be in their perception of things. But when we start lying to ourselves about things that aren't true, it brings us into a lower level of vibration, and that can actually create a sensation of lack or fear. And the other part of this is how we tell ourselves truths that aren't true. And what I mean by that is this isn't the fake it till you make it kind of thing, but we'll tell ourselves that it's something has happened and it hasn't happened, or we create a story that embellishes what has happened, or like if, and we've talked about this before, somebody cuts you off in traffic and it ticks you off, you go and you tell somebody else you've just cut yourself off again. But when we get to the point of, say, 2 days later, the truth is somebody cut us off. The truth that we're embellished, right, is the things that happened after, or you know, we add things to it. They were going 75 miles an hour and a 35, you know, and you're like, did you have your little gun with you, your radar gun? But it becomes, those truths can also, and I'm using truth in quotations. I'll do this because, there we go. Um, so what happens is it elevates the anger or the mistrust, or it increases the energy but decreases the vibration. It increases the fire, let's say. Um, so when I found myself, in essence, starting to lie to myself, I thought, well, why do I do this? When do I do it? I started going to the distraction of how this happens. And I remember even as a child saying, you know, and I've heard many people say this, I was never loved as a child, right? And the lie to that would be, yeah, there were people that loved you. But the truth may
Right.
be that you didn't love yourself, right? So if you're saying that
Right.
nobody loved you when you were growing up, you're also inferring yourself, which could be true,
You didn't love yourself.
right? So
I
as
think it
we,
was true for a lot of us, a lot more than we want to admit.
right, but we don't know really what it is or what we define it as, right? So if somebody didn't buy you an ice cream cone and you said they don't love me, that's not has nothing to do with love. But as a child, that conversation comes up,
It's that stuff. Yeah.
right? When as an adult, I have learned that process so well that I can continue to do it this late in life. But when we go into we talk about the tools that we bring to this, the the one thing I really want people to bring into is actually listen to yourself. And you'll, like with me, it's I I stop the conversation right away because I just not a big fan of absolutes. But when that happened, I stopped myself and I'm like, really? And then I got into the dialogue with myself. And I'm not insane. Well, not too insane. I don't talk to myself all the time, but it's usually a good conversation. But going into that, I
I
thought,
usually have pretty good conversations with myself.
yeah. Um, and I thought, why am I telling this lie to myself? What purpose does this serve for me in this moment? So I have to go back in, and I'm like, why would I even say an always or a never, and in any situation? Because I mentally I already know it's not true. My body can react like it is true, right? So if I say never and my shoulders go down, my head goes down, my shoulders go in, my arms, and my face gets stoic, more stoic than what it normally is. Those are things that actually change your emotion into a physical symptom, let's say. So
Yeah.
getting in that situation again, my body would tell me the lie, and my brain wouldn't have to anymore, right? So if somebody told me, you know, I can't see you, that I can't come to lunch, one of my friends, or say something, I can't come to lunch today, I could just say, nobody wants to come to lunch with me. That's not true, right? But my body would turn into that emotion. My shoulders may go forward, my head may go down. I could be that way. So not just lying
Right.
to ourselves in our minds, but also lying to ourselves in our bodies. And if you go through any kind of store and you can watch people, you can almost tell the mood that they're in by just their shoulder carriage or their head carriage, or you know
Right.
how they are moving. So when we tell ourselves those lies, we don't just say it, we also ingrain it in our physical, in our emotional. And
Right.
once we start to do that, then it can bring other emotions up, which can actually take us even further down that rabbit hole. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And a slippery slope for sure.
So when we're working with the tools, is checking your posture, when you get into a certain situation, I remember I was watching a video today and they were talking about every time Bobby did this when he was little, but every story had to go to the bathroom, like check out what's this bathroom like. But
our kids do it too. It's so funny.
if do you remember when you went to the roller coasters? We'd wait in line for 30 minutes, and we'd get right to there, and you'd be like, "I go to the bathroom," so we'd take you to the bathroom. Because you didn't want to be on the roller coaster.
Because I didn't want to go to the roller coaster.
Was part of it, but there is a physiological response. If right before a race, right before something where you feel like you're going to be stressed, you have to go pee. But it has to do with the way the sympathetic nervous system's prepping to void everything so that it can be a better body to function, right? So
you find a really small tree by the soccer field. Facing the road.
Exactly. So, but that's how.
I don't know who did that.
We can lie ourselves into really an emotional downfall. If you talk in absolutes when you're talking to yourself, listen to your words and find out where it comes from, because I've said things, and I know probably everybody else has. When you say it, and all of a sudden you look around for your parent that's used to say that all the time, you're like, what? So I try not to work in that same. Of course, with you, everything would be brilliant. But I try to.
Only Sith deal in absolutes.
So I try to work emotionally with it. With this week that I've had, if I rolled my shoulders and put my head down, I'd still be dwelling in those emotions. But I don't. I sit up straight. I try to throw my head back. I put my shoulders back a little bit. I get on and do something else to distract myself, because I could just wallow in it, I'm sure, for hours until see how much of a victim I am, and then again, that's another truth that we tell ourselves that's actually a lie, right? So we tell ourselves we're a victim, and the only person that's creating the victimism is us.
It's us,
right? So it's like you said perfectly, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it really is. Getting to that point.
Are there times
once you've done it once, it's a lot easier to do it again. Where I find myself saying absolutes, like about myself, all the time. I think I've probably. I think I've gotten better at it. I always do it, and I always make myself feel bad. But I mean, I'd say 5 years. The last 5 years have been such like leaps and bounds emotionally, spiritually, and with just with my self journey of what I've been doing. I used to be like anytime I'd mess something up, be like, I always mess that up, or if I did something, I'm always late, or I'm always this, I always do this wrong, I always do that, and you start to realize that it's almost like you're. Not only is it not true, but you're also manifesting it to happen more through just overthinking, and through thinking that way about yourself. It's just going to make you feel that way more and more and more. But I try to do better. I think we all have like moments like you do where we find ourselves being like, oh, I just did that. Like absolutes. And I tell people this not just about themselves, but about everybody. You can't say everybody, like all these people are terrible or all these people are that. But I feel like we, as a society, have come to this absolutism of opinion. So it starts as an opinion from one person or five people, and we have these absolutes that just run amok in our society. And I mean, you see it a lot on social media. You see it, especially when it gets to politics and religions and stuff. You have so much absolutism between the right and the left, and you know, Christians and Muslims, and it gets to the point where it's almost like wars between two sides, and it's the same thing when you do it to yourself. It's not true, because absolutes are almost never true. I can't say all not true, but almost never true. But you get to these points, and it's almost like like the public opinion is these two sides are absolutes, and they just hammer them into every single thing that they do or say, and it just is. It's exhausting, and it's not. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't further the love we should be feeling for each other as a human race. And we need to get back to where I feel like 20 years ago you had this. When I was just out of high school, I feel like we had this kind of like start to this revolution where we were starting to try to learn to understand what someone's going through or understand who someone is before we just like make an assumption about a certain group or people or race or creed, whatever. And then we're kind of backtracking now to where it's whatever is on social media is what people believe, and if it's on social media, it must be true. It's always true, and it's just it's so hard to watch some of these things and not get involved in a derogatory way, because part of what I'm trying to change is how we deal with people who think differently than us, so that we can all see each other's sides and see where the other person's coming from. Because just because I believe something doesn't mean you have to believe it, or just because I feel a certain way doesn't mean you have to believe it. And you don't have to just have relationships with people that agree on things that you agree with. But but it's now, in this day and age, it's becoming more of that absolute where you have to believe everything I believe, and always agree with me, and never, like, always and never are two of my least favorite words.
Yeah, and that's when they start talking in that, and the politics and religion, and a lot of that is to create fear and or loss. And when that happens, because politically, and I've been doing a lot of research on this, the left and rights, there's only really like five things that are really the kickers that they separate each other with. The division is fairly absolute right now. And if they'd look at the million things that we should be working on in common, those other things would go away.
Right.
You know, in my opinion. So if we could if we could just focus on what's positive, I think the negatives would just kind of fade away, because we can come closer to loving each other in our differences than a destructive disagreements in our differences. And the funny thing is, there's so many more things
Right.
that we have in common. But you know, in this society, greed is really one of the things. And not just money, but power and voice and all these things that are tearing us apart, but it keeps the division easier to control. Okay? And what I mean by that
Right.
is Republicans and Democrats, let's just say that, they pretty much have 50%. If they could divide them up, it's 50%. All they have to do is sway 1% of the people. So it's
Right.
easier than trying to sway 40% of the people or getting people to come together in a certain way. Um, I mean, I can, I don't agree with any of it, but I can see where if they can just sway it one, and that's the sad part. If I was just trying to get 1% of my day done, because it was everything else was already written down, right? I just had these two
Yeah.
sections that were conflictual, and I had this 1% that I had to do. I mean, it might be a great day, but it doesn't seem like it to me.
Yeah, it's crazy the division between those two groups, because you're right. A lot of things they agree on, but they have this handful of things that they just let completely polarize them, and they don't try to even get common ground.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if they could focus on, and this is for most opposition groups, if you could focus on what you actually have in common instead of your differences, you would make so much more progress than what we are now. But I don't know if we're not going to get all political, but I don't even know if they really want progress or if they just want us to be divided. It's getting to a point where it seems like more and more they try to divide us,
Mm-hmm.
and not just Republicans or Democrats, but as a country. It just seems like we have just two sides mashing heads against each other, and then you get people like me who see things on both sides of the line that are good and both sides of the line that are bad, and you are not welcome either. They both sides don't like us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny to see that dynamic. And
But that's, I mean, the way I see it, the media is based on lies, just like we tell ourselves, right? Or truths that are not truths, right? Because it's
or
like,
half truth.
well, it's like one of the things that I'm just gonna go with it because this still drives me crazy. When the COVID
Do
shot
it.
came out, it's not a vaccine, by the way. It said efficacy, and almost everybody I asked, "What do you think efficacy means?" and they were like, "Efficiency, how effective it is." I'm like, "No, efficacy means it created a system in a laboratory that they liked, or that they were okay with, or that they predicted." So if they gave that to somebody and their goal was 2%, and they made, well, let's just say 10% to make it easier, so that it's at te- they wanted 10%, they got to 7%, so it's only 7% effective in a laboratory under the controlled conditions. They're going to say it's 70, the efficacy is 70%. That's a huge difference, right? But
So yeah,
that's,
we jumped up from 7% to 70%
but it
because
has
it's
nothing to
seventy
do with
percent of the
effectiveness,
efficiency that they wanted.
right?
Right.
Because they could have just said we want it to fail 90% of the time, and it failed 90% of the time. They said its efficacy is 100%. So we don't get the true story.
Right. Oh, okay.
But they use things
Well,
like
that's
that
that's big pharma all over, though.
that's just the confusion and fear, right? And so they've been having a lot of issues with strokes and heart attacks from the people that have been. They're more focused on that. Well, then they're doing an internal investigation to see if it's true or not. Pfizer and Moderna. So I'm like, the fox is always in the hen house, right? And it's like when you're a little kid, you did something, but you blame it on your sibling. It wasn't me.
What you mean, my sisters every day of my life?
Exactly. So, the, not only does the media tell their truth, but they tell their truth in a way to divide people even more. And it doesn't matter which side you're on, right? So if you think about turning that inward, and we tell ourselves those little untruths or the truths that make us feel even comfortable. Some people are really comfortable in the victim mode, and some people are always in the when they're talking about getting into the hero mode or what they've done in the past, and that's when we start telling ourselves the truths that are a little bit stronger or a little bit embellished, which internally we know is a lie. So all those things come into play when we're being divided by media, politics, but even ourselves. Once we can stand in our own truth, we'll be able to look at those and not be in fear mode. We'll be able to look at the other truths on the outside and go, wait, that's not right. That doesn't make any sense. Because we can actually feel it in our hearts that something's not right. And that's also where our truths become lies, or our lies become even deeper ingrained, is because we're just doing it in our brains instead of our hearts. I hope that made sense.
Which is something we shouldn't trust as much our brains as we do our hearts. I think if everybody led with the heart instead of their head, we'd be a much better off.
Yeah, the ego's a tough little thing because it does
just my
have
little
a job.
2 cents.
It does have a job to protect us, but sometimes it's really, really good at its job.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be protecting us from certain things, and I think a lot of people let it protect them from everything and let it run rampant, and just say, well, as long as I have this ego, I can't be hurt. And then, oh, how the mighty have fallen.
And I think sometimes the ego feeds off of those emotions. You know, if I drop my shoulders forward, like if we're returning back to that, I had dropped my head down, my ego's going to start showing up even more to try to protect me.
To try to protect you from that feeling.
But it doesn't. Well, the ego's a whole different thing. We'll go into that sometime. But it also can make you feel even worse because it wants to have a job. So that's a pretty interesting.
It wants to do its job. It knows what its job is, and if it doesn't have a job, then what good is it? So it'll try to drag you into that egotistical mode.
It can amplify it. So that's.
I don't know. I'm just talking. I don't know what I'm talking about half the time here.
Okay.
I just say stuff that sounds good in my head, and if it doesn't sound good coming out, well, that's too darn bad.
But that's just something I want to run with because of the the week I had and what I was going through, and letting people know that how I navigate it. Because it's important to have people that we can reach out to or we can trust and know that, like you said, they're not going to make me feel bad, or they're not going to carry off into their own thing. It's a place where, like the lady with the rage, and I said, just find a safe place and let it go. Don't hold it in, because that creates more of a story.
Well, and that's just touching on the rage thing. When people ask me like what the podcast is about, and I explain it to them, I always tell them that we want to show people that there's a healthy way to deal with emotions.